What if love could change even the coldest of hearts? Nicholas Harrington had everything: wealth, power, and a life without attachments. To him, emotions were just distractions, and people were nothing more than pawns in his carefully controlled world. But when a reckless bet leads him to marry Elena, a woman completely outside his world, he thinks it will be nothing more than a game. 3 months. That's all it was supposed to be. Yet, as the days pass, Nicholas begins to realize that Elena isn't just another challenge, and that his carefully built walls are starting to crack. Can a man who once believed love was meaningless truly change? And when the truth about the bet is finally revealed, will forgiveness be possible? Join us on this emotional journey of redemption, second chances, and unexpected love. Subscribe now and turn on the notification bell to never miss a story that will touch your heart. And now, let's begin. The grand hall of the Harrington estate was alive with laughter, music, and the clinking of crystal glasses. Nicholas Harrington, the evening's host, stood at the center of it all, surrounded by his wealthy acquaintances, men and women whose conversations were laced with arrogance and indulgence. With his signature air of confidence, Nicholas commanded attention effortlessly. Among the guests was Sebastian Vance, a man known for his sharp wit and love of stirring the pot. Holding a glass of wine, he sauntered toward Nicholas, a mischievous smirk playing on his lips. "Nicholas," Sebastian began, his tone playful yet calculated. "You always claim that money is the ultimate power, that anything and anyone can be transformed with the right price." Nicholas, unfazed, raised an eyebrow. "Isn't it true? Wealth removes limitations. With enough money, nothing is impossible." Sebastian tilted his head as if considering the response. "It's easy to say that here, surrounded by people who only tell you what you want to hear. But can you prove it?" The crowd around them hushed, intrigued by the challenge. Nicholas set his drink down and folded his arms, his expression unreadable. "And how exactly do you expect to prove something so obvious?" Sebastian took a step closer, his smirk widening. "I'll bet you $5 million that you can't marry someone completely outside of our world, a woman who doesn't fit your usual standards of beauty or status. And here's the catch. You must stay married to her for 3 months, convince everyone it's real, and completely transform her." Soft gasps and murmurs rippled through the group. The atmosphere in the room shifted as everyone turned their eyes to Nicholas, waiting for his reaction. Nicholas let out a short, amused laugh. "You can't be serious, Sebastian. Me, married to a woman beneath my standards, for 3 months? It's so absurd, it's not even worth discussing." But Sebastian wasn't backing down. Casually glancing around the room, his eyes landed on someone. A slow, knowing grin crept across his face. "What about Elena?" He nodded toward a young woman moving gracefully between the guests, balancing a tray of champagne glasses. Elena was one of the household staff, her hair neatly tied back into a modest bun, dressed in a crisp black and white uniform. She kept her gaze lowered, focused entirely on her work, oblivious to the conversation unfolding about her. Sebastian chuckled. "Your maid, completely opposite of your type. She's perfect for this challenge." Nicholas followed his gaze, his expression darkening slightly as he recognized Elena. "You've got to be kidding me! You've got to be kidding me!" "Me? Marry a maid? That's beyond ridiculous, even for you," Nicholas scoffed, shaking his head in disbelief. "Why not?" Sebastian countered, his smirk laced with provocation. "If money truly buys everything, this should be effortless for you. After all, you're the great Nicholas Harrington. Or are you afraid you'll lose the bet?" The crowd around them fell into a tense silence, hanging on to every word. Nicholas felt the challenge strike at his pride, a blow he couldn't afford to ignore. Backing down now would brand him as a coward, something he refused to be. He licked his lips, his mind working quickly. Finally, he picked up his wine glass, took a slow sip, and then smirked coldly. "Deal. 3 months with her, and I'll prove to you that there's no challenge I can't conquer." The room erupted into murmurs and laughter, but Sebastian simply grinned, satisfied. He extended his hand, and Nicholas clasped it firmly, sealing the agreement. "This is going to be entertaining," Sebastian mused with mock amusement. "But remember, you have to make it look real. I want to see her at events, dressed like a woman of high society. And if you fail, I'll be $5 million richer." Nicholas narrowed his eyes. I don't fail, Sebastian. Get ready to hand over your money. The next morning, Elena Vasquez stood in the kitchen, scrubbing dishes when she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she found Nicholas Harrington leaning casually against the doorway, hands in his pockets, his piercing gaze fixed on her. Mr. Harrington? She asked hesitantly. Do you need something? Yes, Elena. He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. I need to talk to you. It's about a proposal. Elena frowned, confused. A proposal? Nicholas leaned in slightly, carefully choosing his words. He knew he had to phrase this correctly if he wanted her to agree. I want you to marry me. The plate slipped from Elena's hands, crashing into the sink, sending water splashing everywhere. What? You heard me. Nicholas remained calm, as if discussing a business deal. It's a contract, a marriage of convenience. You'll be my wife for 3 months, and in return, I'll pay you an amount that could change your life. Elena let out a nervous laugh, expecting him to reveal it as a joke. That's not funny, Mr. Harrington. I'm not joking. His tone remained firm. He pulled a check from his pocket and placed it on the counter. The number written on it was enough to erase years of struggle. You're struggling, aren't you? He continued. With this money, you could start fresh. Elena's eyes flickered between the check and Nicholas. She knew what kind of man he was, someone used to controlling everything, bending people to his will. To him, she wasn't a person. She was a solution to a problem. Why me? She asked, trying to understand. Because you're perfect for it. Nicholas replied bluntly. No one would ever expect me to marry someone like you. That's exactly why it will work. His brutal honesty unsettled her. Everything in her screamed to say no, to walk away. But then she thought of the overdue bills, the crushing weight of responsibility, and her family depending on her. And after the 3 months, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We get divorced, Nicholas said indifferently. No questions, no ties. You go back to your life, and I go back to mine. But you'll be in a much better position than where you started. Elena took a shaky breath, feeling as if she were standing on the edge of a dangerous cliff. She knew that saying yes would mean stepping into an arrangement where she was nothing more than a pawn in his game. And yet, could she afford to say no? A part of her felt like she was giving up a piece of herself. But maybe, this was her only chance to change her reality. I accept, Elena finally said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. Nicholas smiled, satisfied. Great. Tomorrow, you'll be my wife. She watched as he turned and left the kitchen, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Her heart felt heavy. She knew she was stepping into a dangerous game. But for the first time in a long while, she had a glimmer of hope that things might actually change. The next morning, an unusual tension filled the Harrington estate. The staff whispered in the hallways, exchanging puzzled glances. It was rare for Nicholas to spend so much time at home in the morning, and even stranger to see him dressed so formally so early in the day. For Elena, however, the day had begun like any other, cleaning, organizing, staying invisible. She was in the side garden, kneeling on the damp ground as she gathered fallen leaves from beneath an ancient oak tree. The scent of wet grass mingled with the fragrance of blooming flowers, and for a brief moment she allowed herself to breathe, to feel a small sense of peace. Then a shadow fell over her, breaking the moment of tranquility. Elena? The sound of Nicholas's voice made her stand abruptly. She wiped her hands against the edge of her uniform without thinking, only realizing too late that she had smeared dirt across her apron. She looked up and met his gaze. There was something different in his expression today. Determination, but also something else. Expectation. Mr. Harrington, she said, trying to mask her discomfort. Everything is ready. We're going to the registry office in an hour. Elena blinked in confusion. The registry office already? Yes, the sooner we start, the better. Nicholas shoved his hands into his pockets, his tone businesslike and impatient. The documents are prepared. You just need to sign. Her heart pounded. Until now, the proposal had felt distant, like a ridiculous idea she could still change her mind about. But now, with the reality of marriage just an hour away, it felt suffocatingly real. I need more time, she said hesitantly. Nicholas tilted his head slightly, studying her. Time for what? You already agreed, Elena. And I'm not someone who likes to wait. She wanted to refuse, to walk away. But then she thought about the small apartment she shared with her younger siblings, their tired faces, the overdue bills piling higher each month. With a quiet sigh, she nodded. "All right," she murmured. "I'm ready." An hour later, Alina sat stiffly in the back of Nicholas's sleek black limousine, feeling more trapped than ever. The driver navigated the roads in silence while Nicholas sat beside her, typing messages on his phone, seemingly indifferent to her presence. She gazed out the tinted window, watching the city blur past. The towering buildings, the gleaming luxury stores, the well-dressed people walking confidently down the streets. This world was nothing like the one she came from. It felt foreign, unreachable. "We're here," Nicholas announced abruptly, putting his phone away. The car pulled up in front of a discreet but elegant building. Elena hesitated before stepping out, only to realize that Nicholas had already moved ahead, holding the door open for her. Inside the registry office, 2 lawyers stood waiting along with a small group of staff, employees who had clearly been instructed not to ask any questions. Elena's stomach twisted as she picked up the pen. Her hands trembled, but she forced herself to stay steady. In a matter of minutes, it was done. She was now Mrs. Elena Harrington. Nicholas shook the registrar's hand, then turned to her with a light, almost amused smile. "Congratulations," he said smoothly. "We're officially husband and wife now." Elena tightened her grip on the pen, her heart hammering in her chest. It didn't feel real, and yet it was. Elena murmured a quiet response without looking at him. Nicholas didn't say anything in return. He simply guided her back to the car, where the silence between them felt even heavier than before. When they arrived at the Harrington estate, Elena immediately noticed something different. The curtains had been replaced, the lighting was softer, and elegant new decorations adorned the main hall. There was something almost theatrical about the changes, as if the entire house was preparing for a grand performance. Nicholas led her up the grand staircase and stopped in front of a door. With a simple motion, he pushed it open, revealing a bedroom so luxurious it looked like something out of a magazine. A massive bed, velvet drapes cascading down the windows, and a walk-in closet that was probably larger than the tiny apartment she had lived in. "This will be your room," he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Elena hesitated before stepping inside, glancing around. Everything about the space seemed to whisper that she didn't belong there. "It's beautiful," she admitted, unsure of what else to say. "I hope you're satisfied." Nicholas leaned against the doorway, watching her. "And remember, you're my wife now. It's important that everyone believes it, especially the people in my circle." Elena turned to face him, crossing her arms. "And what exactly do you expect from me, Mr. Harrington?" Nicholas raised an eyebrow, surprised by her defiance. He was used to unquestioning obedience, to people doing exactly as he wanted without hesitation. But Elena didn't seem willing to make things easy for him. "I expect you to play the part," he said firmly. "Elegant dresses, perfect posture, and no impulsive behavior." Elena let out a short, dry laugh. "Oh, of course, because appearances are all that matter here, aren't they?" Nicholas frowned but didn't respond. She was right, and he knew it. But he would never admit that. "You'll have everything you need. Tomorrow morning, a stylist will come to help you choose appropriate clothes." Elena sighed, feeling the weight of it all settle onto her shoulders. She didn't want to accept it, but she knew she was trapped in this arrangement. "Fine. If that's what you want, I'll do my part," she said, her voice steady. "But don't expect me to change who I am." Nicholas shrugged, indifferent. "That's your problem, Elena. As long as you stick to the agreement, I don't care who you are." With that, he turned and left, leaving her alone in the vast, cold space. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, her hands gripping the soft fabric of the sheets. The room was beautiful, but it didn't feel like hers. She felt small, out of place, a stranger in a life that wasn't hers to begin with. Tears threatened to fall, but she forced them back. 3 months, she whispered to herself. Just 3 months. Meanwhile, outside, Nicholas descended the grand staircase with purposeful strides, his mind already calculating his next moves in the bet. He couldn't quite explain it, but there was something about Elena that unsettled him. She wasn't like the others in his world, and that bothered him. The game had begun, but neither of them was prepared for the twist the future held. The next morning, Elena was awakened by the sound of soft knocks at the door. Before she could respond, an elegant woman in a perfectly tailored suit stepped into the room, walking with effortless confidence. Behind her, 2 assistants followed, rolling in a rack filled with luxurious dresses. "Good morning, Mrs. Harrington," the woman greeted her with a professional smile. "My name is Clara, and I've been hired by your husband to help you dress appropriately for the upcoming events." Still sitting on the bed, Elena blinked in confusion. "Upcoming events?" Clara nodded as she began arranging the dresses around the room. "Yes. Mr. Harrington believes appearance is essential, especially for someone in your position. He ordered an entirely new wardrobe for you." Elena scoffed, slowly rising from the bed. "Is this really necessary?" Clara, who had been carefully arranging the luxurious dresses, paused for a moment. Then, with perfect composure, she met Elena's gaze. "With all due respect, ma'am, necessary or not, it's what he wants. I suggest you make the most of it." Elena wanted to argue, but she knew there was no point. The practical side of her won. "Fine," she sighed. "Let's just get this over with." Clara smiled in approval. "Excellent choice." The next few hours passed in a blur of fittings, adjustments, and endless discussions about fabrics and styles. Elena felt like a doll, being dressed and styled to fit a mold that wasn't hers. The gowns were exquisite, the jewelry elegant, but no matter how expensive the clothes were, they couldn't change who she was inside. Deep down, she knew no outfit could truly make her belong in Nicholas's world. When she finally descended the grand staircase, Nicholas was waiting in the main hall, seated in a sleek leather armchair. He glanced up from his tablet, his gaze sweeping over her in silent assessment. "Not bad," he commented with a detached indifference that irritated her more than it should have. Elena crossed her arms. "Thanks, I guess." Nicholas stood, adjusting his tie as he ignored her sarcasm. "We have an event tonight, a dinner with some of my friends. It's important that you're prepared." Elena narrowed her eyes. "A dinner? And when exactly were you planning to tell me about this?" "Now," he said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. She sighed, already exhausted by his attitude. "Fine, but don't expect me to pretend to be someone I'm not." Nicholas smirked slightly. "As long as you don't embarrass me, that's all that matters." The dinner was held at one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, a place renowned for its extravagant decor and elite clientele. The moment Nicholas and Elena stepped inside, all eyes turned toward them. Nicholas walked with his usual effortless confidence, while Elena followed at his side, doing her best to ignore the curious stares. At the table, Sebastian was already waiting, accompanied by 2 other friends who had been part of the infamous bet. As soon as Elena took her seat, Sebastian leaned back in his chair with a smirk. "So this is the famous Mrs. Harrington?" he said, his tone laced with mockery. Elena felt her cheeks burn, but she refused to let it show. "Yes, that's me." Her voice was steady. Sebastian chuckled, swirling his wine glass. "I have to admit, Nicholas, you've really outdone yourself this time." Nicholas shot him a cold glare, but didn't respond. He knew reacting would only entertain his friends more. Elena, however, wasn't about to let it slide. She turned to Sebastian with a calm but sharp gaze. "And you, Sebastian? Do you always spend this much time judging other people's lives?" The table fell into stunned silence. Sebastian choked on his wine, while the others chuckled discreetly. Nicholas looked at Elena, surprised, but he didn't intervene. There was something about the way she held herself that caught his attention. Strength. Defiance. Even in a room full of people scrutinizing her, she wasn't backing down. The rest of the dinner passed with superficial conversation, but Elena could feel the eyes on her the entire time. Every gesture, every word, she was being evaluated, studied, judged, but she didn't let it show. When they finally left the restaurant, Elena let out a quiet sigh of relief as she slid into the car. "Well," she muttered, looking out the window, "that was interesting." Nicholas leaned forward slightly, his gaze lingering on her. "You handled it well." Elena turned to him, caught off guard by the unexpected compliment. "Thanks, I guess." Nicholas gave a half smile but said nothing. He had underestimated Elena, and that realization unsettled him. In the days that followed, Elena began to settle into life at the Harrington estate. She still felt out of place, but she adapted to the routines of the house. The staff, who had initially regarded her with suspicion, gradually warmed to her, respecting her humility and quiet determination. Meanwhile, Nicholas observed everything from a distance. He was a man who controlled every detail of his life. Yet Elena was an enigma, a puzzle he couldn't quite figure out. One evening, as Nicholas sat in his study, reviewing a stack of documents, he heard soft footsteps approaching. Looking up, he saw Elena standing in the doorway, holding a cup of tea. "You look like you need a break," she said, stepping inside without waiting for permission. Nicholas raised an eyebrow, surprised by her boldness. "And you think you can tell me what to do?" Elena shrugged and placed the cup on his desk. "Doesn't hurt to try." He picked up the cup, inhaling the faint scent of fresh herbs. For a brief moment he hesitated. Then, quietly, he said, "Thanks." Elena settled into one of the chairs across from him, glancing at the documents scattered across his desk. "You work a lot." "Someone has to," he replied curtly. She smiled lightly. "Even so, you should rest sometimes." Nicholas studied her, intrigued. There was something about her simplicity, something unguarded, that unsettled him. It was as if she reminded him of something he had long since forgotten. "You're different," he muttered, almost without realizing it. Elena tilted her head. "Different how?" "I don't know." He shook his head as if trying to push the thought away. "Just different." She let out a soft laugh. "I'll take that as a compliment." Standing up, she turned to leave but glanced back at him before stepping out. "Good night, Nicholas." He didn't look away from her. "Good night, Elena." As the door closed behind her, Nicholas leaned back in his chair, still holding the teacup. For the first time in a long while, he felt an unfamiliar sense of peace. And he couldn't understand why. The next morning, Nicholas called Elena to the backyard garden. When she arrived, an unusual scene awaited her. Under the large oak tree stood a beautifully arranged table, set with fine silverware, crystal glasses, and a stack of books. Beside the table stood Clara, her stylist, wearing her usual professional smile. Next to her was an older woman with elegantly styled gray hair and an air of quiet authority. Elena narrowed her eyes as she approached. Nicholas, standing with his usual composed expression, gestured toward the older woman. "Elena, this is Esther," he said. "She's an etiquette and manners specialist. For the next few weeks, you'll have daily lessons with her to learn how to conduct yourself in your new position." Elena frowned. "Etiquette lessons? Are you serious?" "Completely serious." Nicholas crossed his arms as if daring her to argue. "You need to know how to behave at the events I attend. We can't leave anything to chance." Elena let out an incredulous laugh. "Of course. Because nothing is more important than impressing the right people, right?" "Exactly." Nicholas ignored her sarcasm. "Let's begin." Elena clenched her jaw. She knew she was stuck in this arrangement. Walking away wasn't an option. But that didn't mean she was going to make things easy for him. She pulled out a chair, crossed her arms, and leaned back. "All right," she said with mock sweetness. "Teach me how to be perfect then." And so, the first lessons began. The etiquette lessons turned out to be a true test of patience for both of them. Esther, with her impeccable posture and unshakable calm, demonstrated how to hold a wineglass properly, use the correct utensils, and walk with effortless grace. Elena, on the other hand, took every opportunity to test Nicholas's patience, deliberately making small mistakes just to see how he'd react. "Elena," Esther sighed as Elena accidentally dropped her fork on the floor for the third time. "You need to focus." "I'm trying," Elena replied, flashing a mischievous smile. Nicholas, watching everything from a distance, narrowed his eyes. "Elena, you know this is necessary." "Necessary for whom?" "For you." She crossed her arms. "Because I'm perfectly fine the way I am." Nicholas met her challenging gaze. "It's necessary for both of us," he said firmly. "I don't make bets to lose." Elena scoffed but reluctantly picked up the fork again. Despite her rebellious attitude, a small part of her wanted to prove she could do this. Not to please Nicholas, but to show him that he didn't get to define who she was. As the days passed, Elena found herself adjusting, almost against her will. The etiquette lessons became less annoying as she started mastering the basics. However, her relationship with Nicholas remained tense. One evening during dinner, Nicholas watched her closely as she ate, clearly waiting for her to make a mistake. Aware of his scrutiny, Elena calmly placed her fork and knife perfectly on her plate, then lifted her gaze to meet his. "Are you satisfied?" she asked, her tone defiant. Nicholas smirked. I'll admit, you're improving. Well, I'm a dedicated student, she said, a hint of irony in her voice. Despite the teasing, something felt different between them that night. For the first time, Nicholas seemed to see Elena as more than just her appearance or her defiant attitude. He was beginning to realize she was stronger and far more intelligent than he had assumed. The next morning, Nicholas took Elena to her first real test in high society, a charity brunch hosted by one of his business partners, Clarice Belmont. Elena, dressed in an elegant blue gown, carefully chosen by Clara, walked into the grand ballroom at Nicholas's side, feeling every pair of eyes turned toward her. Though nervous, she kept her head high. Clarice, a woman of effortless sophistication, approached with a polite but assessing smile. Nicholas, darling, she greeted smoothly, before turning her attention to Elena. And who is this lovely lady? Nicholas's smile was just a little too forced. This is my wife, Elena. Clarice raised an eyebrow in obvious surprise but masked it quickly with a gracious handshake. It's a pleasure to meet you, Elena, she said smoothly. Nicholas never mentioned he was married. Elena returned the smile, fully aware that Clarice was simply being polite. The pleasure is mine. Throughout the brunch, Elena could feel the curious stares of the other guests. They were watching her, judging her, trying to figure out how someone like her ended up with someone like Nicholas Harrington. But instead of feeling intimidated, she decided to use it as motivation. She wasn't going to shrink under their scrutiny. She was going to own it. When Clarice asked for her thoughts on philanthropy, the other guests leaned in slightly, clearly expecting her to stumble. Instead, Elena met Clarice's gaze and answered honestly. I think helping others shouldn't be limited to exclusive events like this, she said. It's something we can all do in our daily lives, even in small ways. The table fell silent for a moment. The guests clearly hadn't expected that answer. Nicholas, who had been about to intervene, stopped, and for the first time that evening, he truly listened. Nicholas watched as the guests exchanged glances, clearly impressed by Elena's words. What an interesting perspective, Clarice mused, raising her champagne glass. Nicholas, it seems your wife has much to teach us all. Elena felt a flicker of pride and relief. For the first time, it seemed like she had managed to hold her own in this unfamiliar world. Back at the Harrington estate, as they walked through the dimly lit hallway, Nicholas suddenly stopped and turned to her. You were impressive today. Elena raised an eyebrow, caught off guard by the unexpected compliment. Was that praise? Yes, he admitted with a faint smirk. You managed to win people over, even though you're nothing like them. She chuckled, crossing her arms. Maybe that's because I'm not trying to be like them. Nicholas studied her for a long moment, as if seeing something new in her. Maybe that's what makes them so intrigued by you. Elena looked away, suddenly feeling uneasy at his tone. Well, I just did what I thought was right. Nicholas gave a small nod. Keep it up. And with that, he turned and walked away. Elena remained standing in the hallway, watching him disappear upstairs. For the first time, she felt like she was starting to understand Nicholas Harrington. Beneath all the coldness, the arrogance, the control, there was something else, something he hid from everyone, even himself. As the weeks passed, the forced coexistence between Nicholas and Elena began to reveal hidden layers of both. Despite the teasing, the constant clashes, and the unspoken power struggle between them, Nicholas couldn't help but notice that Elena carried an invisible weight, a burden she never spoke about. One night, unable to sleep, he wandered into the mansion's garden. That's when he saw her. Elena was sitting alone on a stone bench, bathed in the soft glow of the garden lanterns. She held something in her hands, a small notebook, flipping through its pages absent-mindedly, her expression unreadable. It's late, Nicholas said, announcing his presence. Elena startled slightly, quickly closing the notebook. I couldn't sleep. Neither could I, he admitted, stepping closer. What are you reading? She hesitated. Just something of mine. Nicholas could sense her discomfort, so he let the matter drop. But his curiosity had been piqued. There was something important about that notebook, and now he wanted to know what. The next day, as Elena helped in the kitchen, Nicholas sat in his office, trying to focus on his work, but his thoughts kept drifting back to the image of her in the garden, lost in the pages of that notebook. Why did it intrigue him so much? Shortly after lunch, when he knew she was still downstairs, Nicholas found himself standing in front of her bedroom door. He hesitated. Then, giving in to his curiosity, he stepped inside. The room was simple, untouched despite its luxurious surroundings. On the dresser, next to a small vase of wilted flowers, sat the notebook. Nicholas picked it up carefully, flipping through the pages. What he found surprised him. Notes and sketches. Almost like a diary. Some pages were filled with doodles of flowers and landscapes. Others contained fragments of thoughts, written hastily as if she had spilled them onto the page in moments of solitude. Then, one particular drawing caught his attention. It was a simple sketch, two small children holding hands with a woman. Below it, a note was written in careful, deliberate strokes. "I promise to protect them, no matter the cost." Nicholas frowned. Who were those children? He hadn't known that Elena had siblings, or children of her own. That evening, as they sat across from each other at dinner, Nicholas found himself distracted. His gaze kept drifting toward her, searching for answers. Elena noticed. Finally, she set her fork down and narrowed her eyes at him. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she asked, suspicion in her tone. Nicholas didn't answer immediately. But one thing was certain. He was beginning to realize there was so much more to Elena Vasquez than he had ever imagined. "Siblings?" Nicholas asked, ignoring Elena's question. Elena froze for a moment but quickly masked her reaction. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious." He gave nothing away. She averted her gaze, clearly uncomfortable. "I have two younger brothers. They're fine. At least I hope they are." "You don't talk to them?" Elena sighed, setting her fork down. "There's not much to say. It's been years since we've been in touch. They live with my aunt in another city." Nicholas noticed the bitterness in her voice but didn't push further. He could tell there was more to the story, but he also knew that if he wanted real answers, he'd need patience. A few days later, while Elena was out with Clara, Nicholas made a call to his most trusted assistant, Marcus. "I need you to find out everything you can about Elena," he said, handing over a photo. Marcus arched an eyebrow. "Anything specific, Mr. Harrington? Family, past, anything she might be hiding?" Nicholas avoided meeting his assistant's gaze, feeling a pang of guilt for what he was doing. "Understood. I'll report back soon." The next morning, a dossier arrived on Nicholas's desk. He read it in silence, the weight of each page pressing down on him. Elena had grown up in a humble neighborhood, taking care of her two younger brothers from a young age. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was only 17, leaving her as their sole guardian. For years, she worked 2 jobs to support them. But eventually she lost custody, not because she didn't love them, but because she couldn't provide a stable home. Nicholas felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest as he imagined Elena, barely an adult, trying to hold everything together, only to have it slip through her fingers. Among the documents was an old photograph of her and her brothers. She looked so young, her eyes full of hope, holding the children in her arms as if she could shield them from the world. Nicholas set the report down and exhaled slowly. He had never stopped to consider what she might have endured. That night, Nicholas found Elena in the garden again, sitting on the same stone bench where he had seen her before. This time, he approached more cautiously and sat down beside her. "I need to ask you something," he said directly. Elena turned to him, wary. "What is it now? Why have you never mentioned your family?" Elena pressed her lips together, clearly caught off guard. "I don't see how that's any of your business." "Maybe it's not," Nicholas admitted, his voice quieter. "But I read about what happened." Her eyes widened in shock. "You read? What did you do?" Nicholas sighed. "I needed to know who you really are, Elena, and now I do." She stood up abruptly, crossing her arms. "Do you think you can just invade my life like this? My story isn't some game for you to explore." "I'm not playing, Elena," Nicholas said, standing as well. "I just wanted to understand why you're so guarded, why you keep everyone at a distance." Elena shook her head, her voice trembling with unspoken emotion. "You don't know anything about me." Nicholas took a step closer. "I know you lost everything," he said firmly, "and yet you never gave up. That's more than I can say about most people I know." Elena fell silent, staring at the ground. Nicholas exhaled. I know I can't change what happened, but I want you to know that, at least while you're here, you're not alone. Elena looked up at him, startled by the sincerity in his voice. For the first time, she saw something real in Nicholas, something that made her question everything she thought she knew about him. After a long pause, she finally whispered, "Thank you." Then, without another word, she turned and walked back toward the mansion. Nicholas remained outside for a while, his gaze drifting toward the starry sky. For the first time in years, he felt as if he was beginning to understand something he had never truly considered before: the value of the people around him. The night was particularly cold, and the Harrington estate felt quieter than usual. Upstairs, Elena sat in her room, staring out the window at the city lights in the distance. She was surrounded by luxury, yet she had never felt lonelier. Her conversation with Nicholas about her past still echoed in her mind, stirring emotions she had tried to bury long ago. She was about to turn off the lights when a soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Frowning, she stood and opened it, only to find Nicholas standing there, his expression unreadable. "Sorry to bother you so late," he said hesitantly, "but I need to talk." Elena raised an eyebrow. Nicholas Harrington never hesitated, and seeing this side of him intrigued her. "About what?" "About us," he said, gesturing vaguely. "And this situation." Elena studied him for a moment, then stepped aside, allowing him in. Nicholas walked in, pacing slightly as if trying to gather his thoughts. Finally, he turned to her, crossing his arms. "I know I pressured you into this arrangement," he began, his voice lower than usual. "And I know I haven't exactly been kind." Elena tilted her head, surprised by his humility. "Is this an apology?" Nicholas gave a crooked smile. "Maybe it is. I'm not very good at this." She crossed her arms, watching him curiously. "Why are you saying this now?" He exhaled, looking her directly in the eyes. "Because I've realized you deserve more than what I've given you so far." For a moment, Elena said nothing, processing his words. It was the first time Nicholas had ever seemed truly vulnerable. "I never asked for anything, Nicholas," she said softly. "All I did was agree to the terms of your game." "I know," he admitted quickly, "but I also know that you deserve respect, and that's something I've failed to give you." The sincerity in his voice stirred something deep inside her. Her anger, her resentment, it didn't vanish, but it softened. "Respect is a good start," she said finally. Nicholas nodded, as if relieved. "Can I stay here for a while?" Elena smirked. "If you promise not to criticize my simple furniture, I suppose you can." A genuine smile broke across his face. As the night wore on, the two of them found themselves sitting on the floor, sharing a bottle of wine that Elena had stashed in a drawer. Conversation flowed between them effortlessly, surprising them both. For the first time, Nicholas spoke about his childhood, something he rarely did. He told her about the pressures of growing up in wealth, where emotions were seen as weaknesses and success was the only thing that mattered. "My mother always said love was a distraction," he admitted, swirling the wine in his glass. "She believed relationships were like business deals. You go into them expecting a return." Elena chuckled softly. "That explains a lot." "Don't be so quick to judge me," Nicholas said with a tired smile. "I know I'm a product of my environment, but sometimes I wonder how things might have been different." Elena observed him carefully, trying to see beyond the cold, controlled mask he always wore. "You can still change, Nicholas." He looked at her, intrigued. "You think so?" "I think anyone can change," she replied with quiet conviction. "If they want to." Nicholas's gaze softened. "And what about you?" he asked. "What would you change if you could?" Elena was silent for a moment, staring at the dark red liquid in her glass. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I wish I'd been stronger. In the past, maybe my brothers would still be with me if I had fought harder." Elena's voice was quiet, but the pain behind it was unmistakable. Nicholas shook his head. "Elena, you did everything you could. You can't blame yourself for that." "That's easy for you to say," she murmured, staring down at the half-empty glass of wine in her hands. Nicholas leaned forward, his piercing gaze locking onto hers. "You're the strongest person I know," he said firmly. "And if no one's ever told you that before, I'm telling you now." Elena felt tears welling in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Instead, She gave him a faint smile. Thank you, Nicholas. In the days that followed, something between them shifted. Though they still exchanged their usual sarcastic remarks, there was a new understanding between them, something unspoken but undeniably present. One afternoon, Elena was in the garden, tending to a patch of flowers, when Nicholas approached her. He looked relaxed. I need your help, he said. Elena turned, surprised. Help? With what? I have an important meeting tonight, he explained, and I think it would be good if you came with me. She raised an eyebrow. You want me to attend a business meeting with you? Nicholas nodded. You're my wife, remember? Elena laughed. I thought that was just to fool your friends. Maybe. His lips curved slightly, but I also think your perspective could be valuable. She paused, studying him carefully. Finally, she nodded. All right, but don't expect me to sit there quietly like some accessory. I wouldn't expect anything less from you, Nicholas replied, amusement flickering in his eyes. That evening, they arrived together at the meeting. As expected, all eyes were on Elena. But this time, instead of shrinking back, she held her head high, bolstered by Nicholas's presence at her side. During the discussion, one of the investors questioned the ethical implications of a new project. And to everyone's surprise, Elena spoke up. With all due respect, she began, her voice steady, I don't think profit and ethics have to be mutually exclusive. It's possible to achieve financial success without compromising the values that truly matter. The room fell into silence. All eyes turned to her. Nicholas, standing beside her, couldn't hide the pride in his expression. The meeting leader, an elderly man in an impeccable suit, slowly nodded. An interesting perspective. Mrs. Harrington, he said. I'd like to hear more. Nicholas glanced at Elena with newfound admiration. Once again, he was reminded of just how different she was from anyone he had ever known. Back at the Harrington estate, Elena was exhausted but satisfied. She kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the living room sofa. Nicholas entered shortly after, his hands casually tucked into his pockets. He watched her for a moment before speaking. You were incredible tonight. Elena smiled tiredly. Thank you. I'm not just saying that to flatter you, he continued. I genuinely think you have something special, Elena. She looked at him, surprised by his honesty. Nicholas, what's happening to you? She teased. He let out a soft laugh, sitting down beside her. Maybe you're changing me. Elena gave him a faint smile, but didn't respond. Deep down, she knew something was shifting between them. She just wasn't sure what it meant. The week passed quickly, and soon, Nicholas decided it was time for Elena's biggest test yet. He was going to introduce her to the most elite circle in society, the annual Elite Ball. A luxurious, high-profile event attended by the country's most powerful figures. But while Nicholas saw it as an opportunity, Elena saw it as a nightmare waiting to happen. When Nicholas first mentioned the event, Elena nearly dropped her coffee cup. A ball? What do you mean, a ball? She asked, raising an eyebrow. It's an important event, Nicholas explained calmly. And now, as my wife, you'll be the center of attention. Elena huffed, crossing her arms. Nicholas, I can barely handle formal dinners. Do you really think I'll feel comfortable in a room full of people judging every detail about me? He shrugged. You've already proven you can handle difficult situations. It won't be as bad as you think. Elena narrowed her eyes. Easy for you to say. You were born into this world. I'm going to be a target in there, and you know it. Nicholas sighed, rubbing his temple. Yes, they'll judge you, but you don't have to care about that. You're not there to please them. Then why am I going? She challenged. Nicholas met her gaze. Because it matters to me, he admitted. Elena was silent for a moment, realizing that for the first time, Nicholas wasn't demanding. He was asking. After a long pause, she finally nodded. All right, she agreed. But if anyone insults me, I'm going to respond. Nicholas gave a slight smile. That's all I expect from you. On the day of the ball, Clara and her team arrived early to prepare Elena. The mansion transformed into an improvised atelier with fabrics, jewelry, and makeup artists occupying every corner. Elena sat stiffly as the team adjusted the gown on her, a long, elegant silver dress shimmering under the soft lights. She glanced at her reflection in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. You look stunning, Clara said, adjusting the hem of the dress. Elena gave a hesitant smile. I don't know. It doesn't feel like me. Clara took her hands gently. You may be wearing something different, she said, but you're still you. Don't forget that. Elena nodded, taking a deep breath. She would need all the courage she could muster to face what lay ahead. When she descended the grand staircase, Nicholas was waiting in the entry hall, dressed in a flawless tuxedo. As soon as he saw her, he stopped, his gaze slowly scanning every detail. You look breathtaking, he said, his tone more genuine than formal. Elena blushed slightly, glancing away. Thank you. You don't look so bad yourself. Nicholas offered his arm, and she took it, feeling as if she were stepping into uncharted territory. The ballroom was a spectacle. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceilings, casting a golden glow over the room. Tables were adorned with exotic flowers and golden candelabras, and a live orchestra filled the air with an elegant melody. The moment Nicholas and Elena entered, all eyes turned toward them. There were whispers, evaluating glances, and even a few stifled laughs. Elena's stomach twisted, but she lifted her chin, remembering Nicholas's words. They're all staring at me, she whispered, leaning toward him. Let them stare, Nicholas replied calmly. They've got nothing better to do. Elena gave a faint smile, appreciating his support. The evening began with formal introductions. Nicholas guided Elena from one group to another, presenting her as his wife. Some guests were polite but distant, while others were openly condescending. One woman, however, stood out, Vanessa Belmont. Tall, blonde, and effortlessly elegant, she radiated an air of superiority. With a charming smile, Vanessa approached Nicholas, completely ignoring Elena. Nicholas, darling, she purred, placing a delicate hand on his arm. It's so good to see you. Vanessa's manicured fingers lightly rested on Nicholas's arm as she turned her attention to Elena. And who is this distinguished young lady? She asked, her voice dripping with false charm. Elena narrowed her eyes slightly, but before she could respond, Nicholas stepped in smoothly. Vanessa, this is my wife, Elena. For a split second, Vanessa's expression faltered, as if she had just heard something completely absurd. But she recovered quickly, offering a polite but calculating handshake. Of course. A pleasure to meet you, Elena. Elena returned the handshake with a cool smile. The pleasure is all mine. Vanessa tilted her head, her gaze assessing like a predator sizing up its prey. You know, Elena, it takes a lot of courage to step into this world. Not everyone can handle it. Elena held her gaze, her smile never faltering. Thank you for the advice, she said sweetly. I imagine it must be difficult, especially for those who try too hard. Nicholas barely suppressed a chuckle, as Vanessa's expression stiffened ever so slightly. Clearly, she wasn't used to someone matching her word for word. When the music shifted to a waltz, Nicholas turned to Elena, extending his hand. Shall we dance? Elena hesitated, glancing around the grand ballroom. I'm not very good at this. Neither am I, Nicholas admitted with a small smile. But let's pretend we are. She took his hand, allowing him to lead her onto the dance floor. As they moved in sync, Elena felt something surprising. She was at ease by Nicholas's side. You're doing well, he murmured, guiding her effortlessly. Maybe that's because you're not stepping on my feet, she teased. Nicholas chuckled, and for a moment, it felt like they were in a world of their own, far from the judgment, stares, and whispers. Later that evening, as Elena sat at a small table, Thomas approached with his usual mocking smirk. So, Elena, he drawled, swirling the drink in his hand, how are you enjoying your role as the perfect wife? Elena crossed her arms, meeting his gaze without flinching. Quite well, thank you, Tom. Thomas let out a low laugh, but there was an undercurrent of cruelty beneath it. I have to admit, he mused, you're doing better than I expected. But tell me, how long do you think it will last? Elena felt anger rise in her chest, but she kept her expression calm. Thomas, what exactly are you trying to prove? She asked evenly. Me, nothing, he said, feigning innocence. I just find it fascinating how Nicholas managed to find someone so unconventional. Before Elena could respond, Nicholas appeared, placing a firm hand on Thomas's shoulder. That's enough, Thomas. Thomas shrugged, raising his hands in surrender. Relax, Nicholas. Just having a little fun. Nicholas held his gaze unamused until Thomas finally backed off. Then turning to Alina, he sighed. Sorry about that. She shook her head. No need to apologize. I can handle people like him. Nicholas studied her for a moment, a trace of admiration in his expression. I know you can. As they finally left the ball, Alina let out a quiet sigh of relief as she settled into the car. As the city lights flickered past the window, she turned to Nicholas. Why did you really bring me here? She asked. Nicholas didn't hesitate. Because I wanted them to see who you are. Alina gave a faint smile, but said nothing. For the first time, she felt that Nicholas saw her as more than just a pawn in his game. The days after the ball brought a different atmosphere to the Harrington estate. Nicholas and Alina began to understand each other in ways neither of them expected. Yet with this newfound connection came new tensions. Because the closer they got, the more dangerous it became. Something was troubling Nicholas, and Alina noticed. It wasn't obvious. It was in the small things. The nights he stayed late in his office. The distant look in his eyes during dinner. The way their conversations would abruptly end whenever something too personal came up. He was hiding something. One morning, as Alina wandered into the library in search of a book, she found Nicholas sitting at his desk. He was staring at a picture frame in his hands, completely lost in thought. He didn't even notice her until she cleared her throat. Everything okay? She asked, noticing the melancholy in his expression. Nicholas quickly set the frame down, his usual mask snapping back into place. Yeah, just memories from the past. Alina stepped closer, curiosity pulling her forward. The photo showed a younger couple, clearly Nicholas's parents, standing beside a young boy. A boy she assumed was Nicholas as a child. The smiles in the photograph sharply contrasted with the tension in Nicholas's face now. They look happy, Alina said softly. Nicholas sighed, running a hand through his hair. They seemed happy. But the truth is rarely as simple as a photograph. Alina sat down across from him. Do you want to talk about it? Nicholas hesitated. He wasn't the type to share feelings, to expose vulnerabilities, but something about Alina made him feel like maybe he could. Finally, he exhaled and spoke. My father was difficult, he admitted. His voice was low, almost as if he were confessing a sin. He believed the only way to succeed was through absolute control, controlling business, people, even family. And your mother? Alina asked gently. Nicholas's jaw tensed. She just went along with it, never questioned him. Alina could hear the bitterness in his voice. And you, she asked. You grew up in the middle of all that? Nicholas nodded. He expected me to follow in his footsteps, to become a copy of him. And for a long time, I did exactly that. I convinced myself he was right, that the world is a place where only the strongest survive. Alina hesitated. And your mother? What did she think? Nicholas looked away as though the answer weighed heavily on him. She always said family came first. But in reality, she chose my father. She chose him over everything. A long silence stretched between them. For the first time, Alina felt like she was seeing the real Nicholas, not the cold, confident businessman, but the man beneath the mask. Maybe that's why you're so reserved, she said carefully. Nicholas let out a dry laugh. Reserved is a generous word. The truth is, I learned not to trust anyone. It's easier that way. Alina leaned forward, meeting his gaze. But you don't have to live that way, Nicholas. You can be different. Nicholas stared at her for a long moment, as if he wanted to believe her words. But before he could respond, the mansion's doorbell rang. The sound was loud and insistent, as if whoever was outside wouldn't leave until they were answered. Nicholas and Alina made their way to the entrance, where Marcus, Nicholas's assistant, was already checking the security monitor. It's Thomas, Marcus said, his voice tinged with concern. Nicholas's expression darkened. What does he want now? The door opened and Thomas stepped inside, his usual arrogance in place, but something was off. Tonight, he wasn't just arrogant, he was aggressive, furious. Nicholas, Thomas said, ignoring Alina's presence entirely. We need to talk. Nicholas folded his arms. I'm listening. Thomas shot a pointed glance at Alina, then rolled his eyes. In private. Nicholas's expression hardened. Anything that needed to be said, he wasn't sure he wanted to hear it. "Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of her," Nicholas said firmly. Thomas let out a sarcastic laugh. "Oh, so now she's your confidant?" he sneered. "Interesting, considering what's at stake." Elena frowned, a growing sense of unease settling in her chest. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice tense. Nicholas shot Thomas a cold glare. "Say what you came here to say." Thomas smirked, pulling a folder from inside his jacket and placing it on the table. "Here's everything," he said. "Proof that your little went too far." Elena. What? She turned to Nicholas, searching his face for an answer. But he said nothing. Nicholas closed his eyes briefly, as if the weight of the moment was crushing him. He had known the truth would come out eventually. But not like this. Not so suddenly. Thomas, his tone dripping with cruel amusement, stepped closer. "Nicholas made a bet with us," he said. "He said he could marry someone like you, a woman completely outside his world, and keep you by his side for 3 months. His eyes gleamed with satisfaction. It was all a game to him. You were just a piece on his chessboard." The silence that followed was devastating. Elena turned to Nicholas, her eyes pleading, waiting for him to deny it. To say Thomas was lying, but he didn't, he couldn't. "Nicholas?" she asked, her voice breaking. Nicholas tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. She took a step back, her chest tightening, as though the ground beneath her had vanished. "So, all of this was a lie?" Her voice trembled, raw with emotion. "Every word, every gesture?" "It's not that simple," Nicholas said desperately. Elena let out a bitter laugh, one with no joy in it. "Not simple?" she repeated. "You played with my life, Nicholas. You used me for some stupid bet." "Elena, please, listen to me," he said, stepping toward her. "No." She stepped back, her anger burning through the pain. "I don't want to hear anything else." Her voice shook with rage, with betrayal, with the realization that she had let herself believe in him. "You're exactly the man I thought you were when I first met you," she whispered. "Cold, selfish, and incapable of caring about anyone but yourself." Thomas, satisfied with the chaos he had caused, gave a mocking smile. "Well," he said lightly, adjusting his jacket, "I think my work here is done. Enjoy your evening." And with that, he walked away, leaving Nicholas and Elena alone. Elena took a deep breath, trying to keep herself from falling apart. "I can't stay here, Nicholas," she finally said, her voice raw. "Not after this." "Elena, please," Nicholas pleaded. "I know I was wrong, but it wasn't just that. I truly care about you." She looked at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "If you cared," she whispered, "you never would have done this." Nicholas opened his mouth to speak, to beg her to stay, but she was already turning away. Without another word, she walked upstairs and began packing her things. Nicholas stood there, frozen, feeling utterly defeated. For the first time in his life, he realized he had lost something money couldn't buy. Elena left the Harrington estate that night. Nicholas had offered to drive her, but she refused. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she needed to leave. As the rideshare car took her away, she stared at the city lights, trying to figure out how to find herself again. Nicholas, meanwhile, sat alone in his study, staring at the empty space where she had stood. He had made the greatest mistake of his life, and now all he could do was face the consequences. In the weeks that followed, Elena stayed far away from the Harrington estate. She rented a small room in a modest boarding house on the outskirts of the city, using part of the money Nicholas had given her. She started looking for work, determined to move forward, but the void left by his betrayal was hard to ignore. Nicholas, on the other hand, well, for the first time in his life, he had no idea what to do next. Nicholas felt the weight of her absence. The Harrington estate, once full of life in the months Elena had been there, now felt cold and lifeless. He spent his nights alone in his office, staring at the folder, the contract that had started it all. He had won the bet, but at the cost of losing her. And now, for the first time, winning felt like the worst loss of his life. One afternoon, Marcus, his assistant, entered the office holding a piece of paper. "Mr. Harrington," Marcus said hesitantly, "I've managed to locate Mrs. Harrington." Nicholas looked up, surprised. He had asked Marcus to find out where she was, but deep down he hadn't been sure if she would ever let him near her again. "Is she all right?" he asked, his voice softer than he intended. "She's working as a waitress at a cafe downtown," Marcus replied. Nicholas remained silent for a long moment, processing the information. He knew he had to see her, but he also knew he couldn't just show up without something meaningful to say. Finally, he exhaled and stood up. "Get the car ready," he said. Elena was wiping down a table at the small cafe where she had started working when the bell above the door chimed. She barely noticed. After weeks of work, she had grown accustomed to the constant comings and goings of customers. But then, she heard a familiar voice. "Elena." She froze. Slowly, she turned. And there he was, Nicholas, standing in the middle of the cafe, dressed in his usual flawless suit, but with a hesitant look in his eyes, a look she had never seen before. "Nicholas," she said, her voice a mix of shock and wariness. "What are you doing here?" He took a step forward, but kept a respectful distance. "I needed to talk to you." "There's nothing to talk about," she replied, turning back to the table she was cleaning. "Please, just give me 5 minutes," he said, almost pleading. Elena paused. There was something different about him, something in his posture, his expression. Against her better judgment, she nodded. 5 minutes. She motioned toward an empty table. Nicholas sat down. Elena remained standing, arms crossed, refusing to let her guard down. "I know I'm the last person you want to see," Nicholas began, his voice quiet, "and I know what I did was unforgivable." "Then why are you here?" she asked firmly. "Because I realized," he exhaled, "you deserve so much more than what I gave you, and I want to make things right, if you'll let me." Elena let out a bitter laugh. "Make things right?" she repeated. "Nicholas, you turned my life into a game. You used me to feed your ego." Her voice shook. "How exactly do you plan to fix that?" Nicholas ran a hand through his hair, taking a deep breath. "I donated the money from the bet," he said. "Every penny." Elena's eyes widened slightly. "You did that?" "Yes," he said simply, "but I know that doesn't erase what I did to you." He looked at her, his voice genuine. "I just want you to know that I regret it deeply." Elena was silent for a moment, processing his words. Finally she asked, "And what do you want from me now, Nicholas?" He looked at her with nothing but sincerity. "I want a chance to prove I can be different," he said. "Not as part of a game, but because I care about you." Elena's heart tightened. She wanted to believe him, but the fear of being hurt still lingered. "I need time," she said, her voice trembling. Nicholas nodded, respecting her decision. "I'll wait," he promised, "as long as it takes." The weeks that followed brought significant changes to both their lives. Nicholas began participating in social projects, something Elena had spoken about during their conversations at the estate. For the first time, he got directly involved, visiting underserved communities, meeting people who had struggled like Elena once had. And for the first time in his life, Nicholas Harrington began to understand a world beyond his own. Nicholas had always lived in a world of power and privilege. But for the first time, he was seeing the struggles of real people, people who had faced challenges like Elena once had. And that changed something in him. Meanwhile, Elena continued working at the cafe, trying to rebuild her life. But no matter how much she tried to focus on the present, she couldn't get Nicholas out of her thoughts. His words at the cafe echoed in her mind, and she began to wonder, had he really changed? One afternoon, while shopping at the market, Elena unexpectedly ran into Clara, the stylist who had worked with her at the estate. "Elena, what a surprise!" Clara greeted warmly, pulling her into a hug. Elena smiled. "Clara, what are you doing here?" "Oh, I'm visiting a social project in the neighborhood," Clara replied. "Nicholas has been coordinating some amazing initiatives here. He's really dedicated." Elena paused, caught off guard. Nicholas had always had the money to support causes like this, but she had never imagined him getting personally involved. "Is he here today?" Elena asked, trying to sound casual. Clara smiled knowingly. Yes, and you should see him, Elena. He's not the same man he used to be. Clara's words lingered in Elena's mind as she walked home. Something inside her whispered that it might be time to see for herself. The next morning, she made a decision. She was going back to the Harrington estate. As she walked through the grand gates, she felt a mix of nervousness and determination. She had left that place broken, and now she was returning, not to go back to her old life, but to find closure. In the garden, Nicholas stood surrounded by a group of children, engaged in a discussion about an educational project. Elena stopped in her tracks, watching him from a distance. He seemed different, more relaxed, more human. When he finally saw her, he froze, his eyes widening in surprise. Then, without hesitation, he walked toward her. "Elena," he said, his smile hesitant, "I wasn't expecting to see you here." "I needed to see for myself," she replied, glancing around. "Clara told me about the projects you've been doing." Nicholas nodded, stuffing his hands into his pockets, a rare moment of uncertainty. "You were the one who inspired me," he admitted. "I realized I had never used my power for anything truly meaningful until I met you." Elena studied him carefully, trying to read the sincerity in his eyes. "You've really changed, haven't you?" she asked almost in a whisper. Nicholas exhaled, his gaze steady. "I'm trying," he said, "and I'll do whatever it takes to prove that to you." Elena took a deep breath, feeling a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying begin to lift. "Nicholas, I don't know if I can forget what happened," she admitted, "but maybe I can forgive you." His eyes lit up with something she had never seen before. Relief, hope, something real. That's all I could ask for. Their meeting in the garden reignited something between them, but they both knew that rebuilding trust wouldn't happen overnight. The path forward was uncertain, but it was a start. Later that afternoon, Elena accepted Nicholas's invitation to lunch at the estate, a small step toward regaining some sense of normalcy. But the atmosphere felt different this time. Elena, once hesitant and guarded, now felt more at ease. And Nicholas, so used to keeping everyone at arm's length, was showing a side of himself she had never seen before. As they ate, Elena broke the silence. "I saw the children in the garden," she said, setting her glass down. "You're really involved in these projects, aren't you?" Nicholas nodded, placing his napkin beside his plate. "Yes," he said. "For the first time, using my money for something meaningful makes me feel—" He trailed off, then smiled softly. "And I owe that to you." Elena tilted her head, intrigued. "To me?" Nicholas nodded. "You made me realize how disconnected I was from reality. Your stories, your strength, they made me question who I was and what I was doing with my life." Elena's heart clenched. She had once thought Nicholas was incapable of change, but sitting across from him now, she wasn't so sure anymore. Elena felt a tightness in her chest. Nicholas's words sounded sincere, but the fear of trusting again still lingered. "Nicholas," she began carefully, choosing her words, "it's not enough to say you've changed. Actions are what truly matter." "I know," he said without hesitation. "That's why I'm willing to do whatever it takes to show you that I'm a different man." In the days that followed, Nicholas invited Elena to accompany him to his social projects. One day, he took her to visit a community school being renovated with funds he had donated. Elena hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready to be that close to him again. But curiosity won. She wanted to see how he would act in such an unfamiliar environment. When they arrived at the school, Nicholas was greeted warmly by children and volunteers. To Elena's surprise, he seemed genuinely interested in hearing their stories and learning about the challenges the community faced. She watched as he knelt down to speak with a group of kids, listening intently to their excitement about the new classrooms. She saw him talking with teachers, asking them what the school really needed, not just what looked good on paper. For the first time, she saw a different Nicholas, one who wasn't just doing this for show. "You're doing well," Elena admitted, watching him speak with a teacher about the school's needs. Nicholas turned to her, his expression calm, steady. "I didn't realize how much this would mean to me," he confessed. I never thought helping others could be so rewarding." Elena smiled, feeling an unfamiliar warmth between them. For the first time, she began to believe that his change was real. Despite their progress, Elena still needed time to process everything. She decided it would be best to maintain some distance while she sorted out her feelings. One morning, as they had breakfast at the estate, she looked up from her plate and said, "I need to get back to the cafe." Nicholas frowned, clearly disappointed, but he respected her decision. "If that's what you need," he said, "I understand." Elena softened. "Thank you," she said, "but that doesn't mean I don't see what you're doing. I just need a little more time." Nicholas nodded, his expression sincere. "I'll wait, Elena, as long as it takes." As Elena returned to her routine at the cafe, Nicholas continued dedicating himself to his projects. He spent hours in meetings with nonprofits, community leaders, and volunteers, trying to make up for the years he had ignored the world around him. During one of these meetings, Clara, who was also involved in the projects, approached him. "You've changed, Nicholas," she said with a knowing smile. "Elena would be proud of what you're doing." Nicholas gave a modest smile. "I just hope she sees it one day." Clara placed a supportive hand on his shoulder. "She already does, but trust her timing. Elena isn't someone who's easily swayed by words alone. You're showing her you're capable of more." Nicholas nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. One afternoon, as Elena was serving customers at the cafe, a group of children came running in, followed by Nicholas. He was dressed casually, something rare, and carried a bag full of books. Elena approached, surprised. "Nicholas? What are you doing here?" He motioned toward the kids, who were already flipping through the books excitedly. "I promised to bring books for them," he explained, "and they insisted on coming with me." Elena couldn't help but laugh, shaking her head. "You really have changed, haven't you?" Nicholas met her gaze. "I'm trying," he said sincerely, "and I hope you can see that." Elena looked at him for a long moment, feeling a mix of emotions. She knew she was beginning to trust him again, but the fear still lingered deep inside. That evening, as she sat by the window of her small apartment, she realized, for the first time in a long while, she wasn't sure if she was running away from him anymore. That night, after Elena closed the cafe, she noticed an envelope on the counter. Her brows furrowed as she picked it up, opening it to find a handwritten letter. From Nicholas. "Elena, I know words can't undo what I've done, but I hope they can at least show you how much you've changed my life. Before I met you, I lived in a hollow world, surrounded by things that never truly meant anything. You showed me that there's more to life than money and power, and for that, I will always be grateful. I know regaining your trust will take time, but I'm willing to wait, not because it's part of a game or a challenge, but because you're the only person who has ever made me want to be a better man. With affection, Nicholas." As Elena read the words, tears welled in her eyes. She wiped them away quickly, but the truth was, for the first time, she felt like she could give him a second chance. The next morning, as the sun shone brightly, Elena sat at the cafe tables, lost in thought. It had been 3 months since she left the Harrington estate, and though she had rebuilt her routine, something still felt incomplete. Then, the doorbell rang. She looked up and saw Nicholas standing there, dressed simply, his expression a mixture of nervousness and hope. "Nicholas," she said, startled. "What are you doing here?" He took a hesitant step forward, his jaw tightening as he gathered his thoughts. "I needed to see you, Elena. There's something I have to say. Something I can't keep inside anymore." She crossed her arms, trying to maintain the emotional distance she had built. "I think we've said everything there was to say, don't you?" Nicholas shook his head. "Maybe, but I couldn't let you walk out of my life without trying again, without telling you how much you changed who I am." Elena let out a slow breath, setting the cloth she was holding down on the counter. "And what exactly do you want from me now, Nicholas?" she asked, her voice measured. "Another chance? To prove you can win at anything?" "No." He said it quickly, firmly. I never want to hurt you again, Alina. I just want you to know that the man you met during that stupid contract, he's gone." He took another step toward her, his voice raw with emotion. "You showed me that life is about so much more than power or money. I'm here because I want to be a man worthy of you." Elena's heart raced, but she kept her composure. His words sounded sincere, but the wounds of betrayal weren't fully healed. She looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Have you really changed, Nicholas?" He held her gaze. "I'm trying," he said, "and all I want is a chance to show you, not with words, but with actions." Elena remained silent, searching his eyes for sincerity. Finally she spoke. "Change takes time, Nicholas. So does forgiveness." He nodded, his expression soft but certain. "I know," he said with a faint smile, "and I'm willing to wait as long as it takes." The weeks that followed were filled with unexpected encounters between Nicholas and Elena. He took her to see the social projects he had started. She invited him to see her world at the cafe. Little by little, Elena began to notice something. The man standing beside her now was different from the man she had met months ago. One day, Nicholas invited her to a charity event in an underserved neighborhood where he had been working. Elena hesitated, but then curiosity got the best of her. Elena agreed to attend the charity event, wanting to see for herself how Nicholas behaved in those settings. During the event, as Nicholas spoke about the changes being implemented in the community, he looked directly at Elena in the audience and smiled. There was something different in his eyes, something real. After his speech, he approached her and extended his hand. "Come with me," he said. "I want to show you something." Nicholas led Elena back to the estate, to the garden, where so many important conversations had taken place. But this time, the place was transformed. Rows of twinkling lights hung from the trees, casting a soft glow over the path. A trail of flower petals led to an arch, decorated with white and red roses. Beneath the arch, a small table with 2 chairs waited, complete with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Elena stood speechless, taking in the breathtaking scene. "Nicholas, what is this?" she whispered. "Something I needed to do," he said, guiding her forward. When they reached the arch, Nicholas took her hands, holding them firmly. "Elena," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "you've changed my life in ways I never could have imagined. Before you, I was an empty man, obsessed with control and success, but you showed me what truly matters. People, connections, love." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she let him continue. "I know our beginning was wrong, and I can't change the past. But what I can do is promise you a better future, if you'll let me." Nicholas released her hands for a moment and pulled out a small velvet box from his pocket. Then he slowly knelt down, looking up at her with an expression she had never seen before. Vulnerability. Hope. Love. "Elena," he said, his voice trembling, "I don't want you to be my wife because of a contract or a bet. I want you to be my wife because I love you. I want to build a life with you, one built on respect, trust, and true love. Will you marry me for real this time?" Elena covered her mouth, tears streaming freely down her face. Her heart was torn between the pain of the past and the hope for the future. But as she looked at Nicholas, she saw sincerity. She saw regret. And above all, she saw love. She took a deep breath, then whispered, "Yes, Nicholas." Her voice shook. "I accept." Nicholas's face lit up with pure joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he stood, pulling her into a tight embrace. And under the soft glow of the lights, beneath the arch of roses, it was as if the world around them had disappeared. Their wedding took place in the same garden. But this time, it was even more magical, adorned with fresh flowers and candles, casting a warm golden glow over the ceremony. Elena wore a white gown with delicate embroidery, her hair styled in an elegant bun, with tiny white flowers woven through it. Nicholas stood at the altar in a classic black suit, his eyes filled with emotion as she walked down the aisle. Each step carried the promise of a new beginning. Their guests, friends, volunteers, and people who had become significant in their journey watched in silence, moved by the union that was finally happening in a genuine way. During the vows, Nicholas held Alina's hands and said, "Alina, you are the best thing that has ever happened to me. I promise to love you, respect you, and stand by your side through every moment, good or bad. Thank you for giving me the chance to become a better man." With tears in her eyes, Alina replied, "Nicholas, you've shown me that people can change, and that true love requires courage. I promise to." Elena's voice was steady, filled with love and certainty as she spoke her final vow. "I promise to walk by your side always, as we build our life together." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Nicholas cupped Alina's face, leaning in, and as they kissed, the crowd erupted into cheers and warm applause. Petals were tossed into the air, swirling around them like a dream. The reception was filled with music, laughter, and dancing. Nicholas and Elena, hand in hand, cherished every moment, knowing they had overcome the past and were now ready to build a future together. So what do you think? Did Alina do the right thing by forgiving Nicholas and choosing to marry him? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to stay updated with all our stories. And if you love emotional stories, check out more by clicking here on the end screen.